covering the stories that impact your life, your town, your state, and your future. This is the Means Report with your host, Brad Means.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Means Report. We certainly appreciate you spending part of your day with us, where today we have two great guests that are going to talk about some exciting things in Augusta. First of all, we're going to take a look at the wonderful world of architecture and what it takes to renovate Augusta. And we have one of the leading experts in our community to talk about what it takes to transform spaces and make them useful and make them fit the times. Speaking of modern times, we're going to talk about the latest and greatest equipment and technology that is out there for our military. A huge annual event is about to come to Augusta where the world of armed forces and the commercial sector merge under one roof, and it helps make our troops better equipped in the long run. And of course, we'll wrap up this edition of the Means Report with ways that you can stay in touch. But first, let's talk architecture, shall we? It's a fascinating subject, and here to make us all understand it is Nick Dickinson Jr. He is the CEO of Dickinson Architects, a very busy person indeed. Nick, thanks for taking time to be with us on the Means Report. I appreciate it.
Brad, thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here with you this morning.
You, I have to say off the top, are continuing a rich legacy that was started by your father, your late dad, who was just a wonderful man, who started this company in the early 1980s. And we can see his influence and his impact on this community when we drive around and look at things, look at buildings. When did the light bulb come on for you when you said, hey, you know what, Dad's got a pretty cool job, I think I'll pursue that?
It's a great question. So there was really never one aha moment that I realized now I want to be an architect. Being raised by an architect, I think that he definitely fostered some of my natural tendencies. I enjoyed playing with Legos, Lincoln Logs, all of that kind of stuff as a kid. And, playing with Legos before you bought them as kits like you do today. It was just a bag of bricks and you got to use your imagination to build whatever you wanted. So I think he really picked up on what I enjoyed doing and what I was naturally inclined to do and just kind of fostered me along. Even as a kid, I was a UGA fan. I was a big Bulldog fan. We would go to Bulldog games and never really thought about how my interests would correlate into my education. Then got into high school, started exploring some art classes, really enjoyed that, and realized that Georgia Tech was probably a better fit for me than UGA, and just continued to follow that path. So it was really just a natural progression, not just a light switch moment.
Did your friends give you a hard time, your childhood friends, when you switched to tech?
A little bit, and with the sun there at Georgia, I still wear a little bit of red on the weekends.
No, you do a good job of giving both sides their love. Has the business changed over the years from maybe when your dad started it to now, or is it still, at the end of the day, build me something nice and stay within my budget?
So that part of it still is pretty much the same. When you really get down to what we do, we're problem solvers. A client will come to us with a problem that they might be aware of, or they might just be aware that something's not functioning right. So they'll come to us, we'll sit down, have a discussion, and try to pinpoint what that issue is. And of course, we always have to recognize budget. That's something that is ever-changing these days and hard to work within. But that's definitely our task, is to deliver a solution to the problem on time and on budget.
What's the difference between architecture and building or construction? Do we come see you first and then everything else starts to take shape, or do they overlap?
Right, so that actually is one aspect of the industry that has changed over the years. It used to be that the architect really was the first person that the client would come see. We would come up with a concept, fully flesh that out, and then go to the contractor. That was a great model, but today it's really morphing into a team environment, and it's really best for all parties to work that way. The owner, the contractor, the architect. It's a way to identify all issues early in the progression of the project. It's a great way to control costs. Mm-hmm. The owner isn't surprised at the end that what we thought was going to cost X is really Y. And in today's fluctuating market, that is ever critical. Costs, delivery times are hard to manage. They're just not consistent day to day.
When you approach a project where a building that has historical significance is involved, and there are plenty of those in Augusta for sure, does it make it a challenge to bring it up to date and to make sure it has all the amenities that we want in our offices and in some cases in our homes, but largely in your case in our offices? Do you kind of step back and go, okay, I have to be careful here?
Right, historic buildings definitely do present a specific challenge. Just yesterday, I spent 2 to 3 hours walking around the Bell Auditorium trying to resolve some mechanical structural conflicts. So I'm a part of the design team that's working on the renovation of the Bell. And of course, that building was built in the 1930s. There wasn't much thought for 50, 80 years down the road of what might need to be integrated into that building to serve today's population. So it's a concrete structure, and the overhead clearances are really low, and trying to get ductwork from point A to B is challenging. A lot of things that you can't see when the building is complete and in its entirety, so we have to get in there, do some demolition, expose the structure. And yesterday I walked around with the team for about 3 hours and just walked different paths trying to deliver the modern amenities in an old building.
Speaking of historical structures, you all are doing some amazing work and a lot of it seems like a large undertaking to me at the Academy of Richmond County, a school that's one of the nation's oldest. It was built at its current Russell Street location back in the mid-1920s. So what needs to be done to that building? And before you got started, did you have to just, as you did with the Bell, kind of make sure it was structurally sound before you even took the next step?
Yes, that is a very special project in my office. I have a very personal connection to it. We worked on the design of that building for probably 3 years before we were able to release it to the contractor.
This is your alma mater.
That's correct, yes. 2 sons will have graduated by 2025, so it is indeed very special to me. During that design process, we had to work around class schedules just to be able to get in and do some selective demolition so we could try to figure out the construction. You can imagine the building was built in 1926. The existing records are not that great.
Yeah.
So it took a fair amount of time to really dissect the building, understand how it's put together, how it might not meet today's codes and be a safe environment for the kids. Not that it was unsafe, but the codes have certainly become more stringent as time has progressed.
Sure, mid-1920s versus the 2020s, things have changed. Technology has changed.
Exactly, right. And that's one of our challenges, is to integrate technology to create a modern learning environment for the students. Back in the 20s, the classroom size was significantly smaller. So one of our tasks is to open those classrooms up, create larger, more interactive spaces that can be flexible and very adaptive.
Nick, how do you do that without changing the exterior of the building? We all, as Augustans, want to be able to drive by that, and whether we went to school there or not, enjoy the beauty of that old Gothic building.
Right. It can be challenging. The challenges, of course, can be overcome. It just takes a little bit of study to use materials that won't sacrifice the historic character. Generally, our goal is to walk away from this building with most people seeing this as it looks like no time has changed since the 1920s, that it was just freshly constructed. We don't want to have any interventions into the design that are very obvious. We really want to respect the historic character.
What did you do with the staircase?
Right.
Both of our boys, because of the pandemic, got their diplomas at the top of that iconic staircase at ARC. As we record this interview, it is missing.
It is, yes. The timing was difficult. I think we tore it down right as the orientation was going on. So raised a lot of questions. But fear not, the stair is coming back.
Oh, good.
It will be back and look nearly identical to what it was in its original day. We will be making some improvements to the stair, of course, to make it a completely safe place for the students to gather and to just move throughout the school. But generally, improving the structure of that object and the safety.
Well, it's going to be amazing when you're finished. I want to hit on a couple of more general architectural topics before I lose you. The first one is post-pandemic. So many people work at home. Has that impacted your design approach? When people need office space, do they need less of it? Do they need it to look different so they can connect with people who are still at home? How's that work?
Right, so that definitely has changed. And to one degree, they do want less, but they really want it to be more flexible. So collaborative space is very big. Hoteling space, meaning space where it's not your office 5 days a week. It's just an office. You come in for a few hours a day. Somebody else comes in for the other amount of time. So it's a flexible space that can be reconfigured throughout time as their staffing needs change.
You know, I was interviewing a guy in charge of a hotel one time, and he told me that they were redoing the whole hotel, and the reason was because they wanted to put a ton more electrical outlets and USB outlets in every room because that's what the customer demanded. Do you hear that kind of stuff a lot?
Of course, right. We always have to listen to the customer, and that's the best way to learn how to design, really.
Yeah.
Our motto is better spaces, better lives. We want people to interact with the space. And to do that properly, we need to know what their wants and needs are.
Technology is changing so much, and I'm going to talk about this with our next guest when it comes to the event that's coming up in Augusta that's technology heavy. Is it a challenge to keep up with that? So you design a space, it has the latest and greatest, all the outlets, all the Wi-Fi, all the open air, and all the flexibility that you mentioned. But then a year later, there are new gadgets out there. Do you have to revisit a lot of projects?
Occasionally we do,
yeah.
Right. But the key is trying to make things as flexible as possible. So
yeah.
Providing pathways to make improvements in the future. You never want to hem yourself into a corner. And really to talk a little more about technology, that has really changed how we deliver our services. So back in the days when my dad started the company, he was at a drafting board, hand drawing all day long, and some of my earliest memories are of him doing that. With the integration of technology into our practice, it's really changed how we not only deliver our product to the client, but how our client interacts with us. So what we have begun doing is actually integrating virtual reality into that experience.
Oh my goodness, that's already in the world of architecture.
Yes. Everything that we design is three-dimensional, and it creates a digital model that clients can, they used to just see it on the screen. Now we'll sit you down in our conference room, put on a set of VR goggles, give you some joysticks, and with that, the client can walk themselves through the house or the school and really experience it. And you compare that to what it used to be of just showing a client a flat set of drawings.
Right.
It's a much improved way to communicate design and for the client to really understand what their end product is going to be.
It makes me want to go build something right now just to have that cool part of it. What a fascinating use of AI and everything else that's out there. Probably my last question, and it's just something I thought about when I was driving around the other day. So many times when we drive past a building or walk into a space, there's that first impression. Do you think about that from a design standpoint? What can I have? A piece of art, maybe a fountain, maybe it's the landscaping. Do you ever think about first impressions?
Oh, most definitely. Architecture, of course, is very experiential. You might not know it, but when you're walking throughout downtown, throughout your house, any building, you're experiencing architecture. And what we want to do when we're trying to solve that problem that I mentioned earlier is think about that process, how a client approaches the building, how the general public moves through it, what are their thoughts, what are their feelings, and then we try to respond to that emotion to make it experiential.
Well, you're doing beautiful work around town, as your company has done for decades, and I appreciate you taking time away from those projects to talk to us, Nick.
Brad, it was my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Nick Dickinson, Jr., we appreciate him very much, helping our town look better. When we come back, we are going to talk about TechNet. It is an annual conference that has so many cool gadgets. We'll explain in a moment.